Perhaps one of the most intriguing subcultures I found on the internet is the DOOMER. If you're on the right side of Instagram Reels, you've definitely seen this. It's that crude drawing of that guy smoking a cigarette. I know it's hard to miss, but if you're the observant type, you can see that he actually looks pretty depressed. You can kind of see now why it's called DOOMER. He looks pretty sad. The subculture and type of people he represents is actually quite melancholy. Now, obviously this video isn't just about pointing out the obvious and saying,
"Oh yeah, no, that guy's pretty sad, yeah."
Yeah, no, that's kind of like the point of the image. It's a feeling comprised of complete existential dread. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to just look at this and know what it's about. This specific character is called a Wojak, and there's many different types, but I specifically just want to be talking about the DOOMER image in this video. So this video will be divvied up into two separate sections. The first portion will be about what the DOOMER actually is, where it came from, and what kind of music is associated with this vibe. The second section of this video will be completely tied to liminal spacing. If you don't already know what that is, I'll define it later and explain how it ties into the DOOMER mentality. So let's get right into section 1 now. I mean, the logical first question to ask is, what actually is a
DOOMER?
For a simple definition, it's a type of subculture of people associated with a very pessimistic worldview and a huge hanging sense of hopelessness. Essentially, this is basically nihilism, the belief that literally nothing matters. Using this mentality, you can look at it two ways. The first being that people look at life like this.
Oh, I'm gonna die anyways. I might as well go and talk to that girl I really like.
Right. Staying positive. Or the other mentality is,
No, I don't care. I'm gonna be like, sit down there anyways, whatever.
that is essentially the DOOMER's mentality. The belief that nothing matters. Now, I gave a specific location in the title of this video, that being the Eastern Bloc. I believe mainly this is where the whole DOOMER subculture came out of. For context, the Eastern Bloc were countries around Central and Eastern Europe aligned with the Soviet Union until it collapsed in 1991. After the dissolution, it left many countries feeling existentially uncertain with their socioeconomic state. In other words, people were uncertain if their own countries would crumble next. This left a lot of people developing nostalgia for stability granted by the Soviet Union, even if it was far from perfect. This sense of almost having a lost future is something a lot of people can relate to today. That's why the DOOMER image is becoming so prevalent online. In certain countries, people are beginning to drown in the economic states. This leaves them longing for a previously not as developed economic state where things were still affordable. It goes even further than economics, though. People begin to develop the DOOMER mentality in terms of relationships, specifically for people who feel as though they've been heartbroken a million times. They kinda just stop trying. All of these themes of hopelessness and dread are echoed in the music associated with DOOMERism. Also emerging from the Eastern Bloc, genres such as darkwave capture the themes of alienation in the DOOMER mentality. Probably the biggest band with the DOOMER sound would be Molchat Doma. These guys are pioneers of that dark aesthetic. I mean, come on, just look at the cover of this album. It looks so gloomy. The architecture in the album cover purposely captures that sense of coldness. Specifically in Molchat Doma's Spotify description, it said that the architecture used is cold, gray, imposing, and industrial, yet there are still human hearts beating within those foundations. I'll go into the architecture a little bit more later, but I think that quote is important because it shows that there are still just normal people living in those cold industrial buildings. And with Molchat Doma's main album, that building is actually real. In fact, it's a resort in Slovakia, but they used it to capture that dystopian feeling, which is super important to the DOOMER aesthetic. Unfortunately, I can't play DOOMER songs here because I'll be striked back to the Stone Age, but if you're curious, I'll link a couple in the description for you to check out later. So now I think we know what a DOOMER is, where it came from, and what kind of aesthetic comes with this mentality. So I'll move into section 2 on how the DOOMER culture relates to liminal spacing. So again, just like the first section, the question to ask is,
What is a liminal space?
I'd bet that you've already seen these type of images, you just might not know what it's called, i.e. the backrooms. This specific image of a dreary, empty hallway went nuts online. A liminal space appears very eerie and often very surreal. It falls directly into the uncanny valley genre. Basically, this has to do with an object's resemblance to a human being, and the emotional response given by that object. The farther away it is from looking human, the more uncanny it is. Most settings of liminal spaces have to do with stripping the expected context. This usually has to do with no people being present in the pictures. It's just you and your thoughts in this completely surreal place. That becomes even more terrifying when there could be something in there with you. Yeesh. Some of you might be saying now,
I consider myself a smart cookie, I am. I can see how this relates to the DOOMER thing, you know?
I love voice changers. Absolutely, the Doomer mentality and liminal spacing go hand in hand. This is because of Soviet architecture, which is intertwined with the concept of brutalism. This building style originally came from the United Kingdom during the 1950s. They are often said to have a very imposing appearance, with large blocky shapes being used as the foundation. And a defining characteristic of the building style is the use of raw materials, like concrete. The idea behind brutalist architecture is function. Utilizing a very minimalistic style, these buildings are great for rebuilding after war times. Cheap and lots of housing. Doesn't look all too inviting though. Specifically in Russia, these buildings would be 3 to 5 story apartment buildings called Khrushchevkas, named directly after Stalin's predecessor Nikita Khrushchev. The idea of mass housing and blocky architecture is a staple for the Soviet Union. Still, that type of architecture is prevalent in the Eastern Bloc today. Thus, when liminal spacing became a popular topic, these buildings were used for reference because of the cold atmosphere presented. So it makes sense how the Doomer mentality through architecture, depressing feelings evoked, and location is related to liminal spacing. As well as liminal spacing images can spark a feeling of being almost stuck. That is a word that fits right into the Doomer subculture. It's like being in a deserted hallway or an abandoned mall. It invokes feelings of loneliness or unease, almost being lost in the nothingness of the environment, i.e. feeling stuck. It's not a surprise why liminal spacing has gotten so popular today. A lot of people feel as though they're in a rut and don't know what to do with their lives. Finally, the Doomer subculture and liminality overlap directly in urban landscapes. As mentioned before, Khrushchevkas link liminal spacing and Doomerism. But it goes further because empty streets, highways, or urban ruins symbolize isolation. Imagery that suggests the passing of time or abandonment mirror the Doomer's sense of a decaying world or fading future. This theme of transition is from feeling disconnected from the present, yet uncertain about what's to come. If you want to see it with your own eyes, just look up Doomer music playlists. Almost every single song is paired with a depressing urban background. I think it's impossible to talk about the concept of Doomerism without mentioning how liminal spacing is intertwined with it. The stark imagery of liminal spaces acts as a visual metaphor for the Doomer's inner life, essentially just a void. I find it very interesting how a vibe or certain sound can be portrayed through an actual physical environment. You can basically just look at a liminal space and describe the exact Doomer mentality without even knowing what it is. That's how close these two topics actually are to each other. The industrial urban decay of brutalist architecture comes right from the Eastern Bloc, which is why I believe that is the Doomer mentality's home. So even though the Doomer mentality is just an internet meme symbolized by a Wojak character, I think it speaks volumes to how people genuinely feel in society nowadays. But hey, maybe I'm just full of it, I don't know. If you are one of those people that thinks,
Yeah, man, I don't know what you... I don't know what you're talking about, man, honestly.
then I guess just leave a lengthy comment and I'll be sure to explain a little bit better in the next videos. Hopefully this made a little bit of sense to some people. If you are one of those people, let me know what you think. I chose this topic because I thought it was really niche and I've seen no videos on this. I had a lot of fun looking into this, so thank you for watching. See you later, alligator.